Okay, so hi Jen. Jennifer Leese is a registered dietitian and she's a health supportive chef, and she has her company Chef Girl, and you could find her on Facebook where she has delicious and informative information for us on meal planning. And today she's on Facebook to find that. And today she's going to help us make nutritious and delicious choices in what we eat. And she is going to help us decide on what makes us decide on what we're going to eat and how we feel while we're eating things. So I will let Jen take it away, and thanks, Jen.
Thank you. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this program tonight. I am going to go ahead and share my screen so I can pull my PowerPoint up here. So just give me 1 second. Let's start the show. Start the show. Okay. And I will ask you at some points during the presentation, I might ask you some questions, and you can just drop answers in the chat box. There will be time at the end of this presentation for questions, but definitely as I'm going through the information, if you have any questions, just leave them in the chat box and I will make sure that I return to them, and I'll answer any questions that were left in the chat at the end. So even if I don't stop in the moment to answer them, I will definitely get to all of them. Okay. Just want to make sure I can actually see that. Okay. All right, so for today's workshop, we are talking all about mindful eating and cooking strategies to support your body and your mind. And so that will make more sense as we talk about it. But the general idea here with mindful eating is that we are not just supporting our body with the food choices that we make, right? We're not just supporting our physical health, but we are also supporting our mental health, our emotional health, and how mindful eating will really kind of encompass a lot of different facets of your health. So the learning objectives for this presentation are to understand what mindful eating means and how it can benefit different facets of your health, to start to identify mindless eating behaviors and understand how to make them more mindful. We'll identify how dieting can actually disrupt mindfulness and why it will benefit you more in the long run to get more in tune with your own intuition. And finally, we'll learn how to apply the mindful strategies that we talk about into your daily eating habits. So just a brief introduction. I did a workshop a few weeks ago with the Oceanside Library. So if you were there for that, welcome back. But this is going to be the same introduction. So my name is Jen. I am a registered dietitian and a certified dietitian nutritionist. I'm also trained in health supportive culinary arts. So I combine the two. I have experience in clinical and community nutrition, as well as some corporate wellness. And then in 2019, I opened up Chef Girl Nutrition, and that is my personal business. And through my business, I provide personalized one-on-one nutrition counseling. For a lot of mindful eating is what I focus on a lot in the one-on-one nutrition counseling, and just, generally helping you make the right food decisions for your own health goals. I also do individual and group cooking classes. I do culinary nutrition workshops, kind of like the one we're doing today. And that's also what I do in the corporate wellness space. And then I also do some recipe development, really making, nutritious and healthy food taste delicious, which takes me into the mission of Chef Girl Nutrition, which is to simplify nutrition science and healthy cooking to really help you feel confident in your food choices without relying on fad diets. And I'm also passionate about erasing the stigma that healthy food is bland and boring, and that you need to spend hours in the kitchen to create nutritious and delicious meals. So all about helping you to really feel confident in your food choices and just to, peel away some of the myths and challenges around healthy eating to just really simplify it into what the basics are. So diving into today's topic. So what does it actually mean to be mindful, right? So we'll start there with the definition of what being mindful even is. So the actual definition, like the Merriam-Webster definition of mindful, is bearing in mind or inclined to be aware. So that word of aware is really what we're going to be focusing on throughout the rest of this workshop. Okay, so that's kind of the main pillar of what mindfulness is. So that real first step is having non-judgmental awareness. So that's the first thing to help us be more mindful, is to bring awareness to our current behaviors and habits, to then be able to understand, are they serving me well? Are they not? Are they supporting my health goals? Are they not? What can I do differently? How can I make this better support my lifestyle? And so it's really important to come at this with non-judgment. Okay, so that's why I write non-judgmental awareness. Because as you start to uncover some, habits and patterns that you find in your eating behaviors, it can be easy to, pass judgment on yourself. It can be easy to feel negatively, to talk negatively to yourself when you become aware of some of these habits and behaviors that aren't necessarily the most health supportive, right? But this is not about passing judgment on yourself. It's truly just about bringing awareness to these habits and behaviors so that you can better understand where you can make some adjustments to make it all fit better within your lifestyle and to help you achieve your health goals. Okay, and then being more mindful also means getting back to connection with your own intuition, right? And so I say that that's kind of what gut feelings are. So when I say connection with your intuition, it's really being able to connect with what your body knows is right. And then being more present. So those are, to me, the three biggest pillars of what being mindful means. Okay, so it's the non-judgmental awareness, it's connecting back with your own intuition, and then being more present. So what does mindfulness look like with eating? So we're going to dive into some examples here. And again, as I open up this table, I want you to remember that we are approaching all of this with non-judgmental awareness. Okay, because I'm sure most of you will be able to relate to a lot of the behaviors that I'm going to show on this slide here. I know that I certainly can relate to all of them. And I would love it actually if you, I'm going to pull up the table now. I would love it if you could leave a note in the chat box if you can relate to any of these, all of them. If you want to share, a kind of experience that you've had where maybe this helps you recognize a more mindless behavior versus a more mindful behavior. So let's just go through these one by one. So a mindless behavior could be something like eating chips by the handful straight from the bag, right? And then the more mindful behavior would be to actually pour out a serving of chips into a bowl and then enjoy them. Another example of a mindless behavior is eating your workday lunch in front of the computer screen while you're doing work. Versus the more mindful behavior would be to take your actual lunch break, sit away from your work, and enjoy your lunch without distraction. Another mindless example is you're eating dinner at the table while you're scrolling through Facebook on your phone, right? That's become a much more common issue with the growth of social media, and maybe some of you experience that with your own kids at the table. And so the more mindful behavior would be, of course, to eat dinner at the table with no phones or other electronics. Another one is going into the grocery store without a grocery list and wandering the aisles, buying items that you don't need. Right. And so this is also, we're going to dive more into this, but this is also the first example to show you that we're not just talking about mindfulness with the actual act of eating, but we're talking about mindfulness from everything from planning what you're going to eat, to making your grocery list, going to the grocery store, prepping your food, and then eating it, right? So it's adding mindfulness into the whole experience. So of course, a more mindful behavior with the grocery store is that you're going in prepared with a list so you know exactly what you need. And the last example here is you're standing by the fridge eating cold leftovers while you figure out what to make for dinner, versus a more mindful behavior would be having your meals planned so you're not ravenous before dinner and you know exactly what you're making. Okay, so like I said, I know that I can relate to every single one of these. And the really important message that I want to give to you here is, like I said, it's non-judgmental awareness, right? So it's just bringing awareness to some of our behaviors that really just become habit, right? It's not necessarily that we're doing things intentionally. It just can become habit. Like, yeah, we eat dinner on the couch and watch TV. Like, yeah, I have my phone out next to me during dinner, or something like your workday lunch. That's become even more of a challenge, I think, for people working from home, right? Since the pandemic, and you're working from home, and it kind of becomes a lot harder to separate yourself from your work during the day. So it's non-judgment, just bringing awareness to the behaviors. And it's also recognizing that, you know, as we continue through this presentation, I'm not telling you that you should never do any of the mindless behaviors, right? That's just not realistic. Like yesterday was the Super Bowl, for example, right? So on something like the Super Bowl, you're going to be sitting on the couch watching TV, eating snacks, right? So it's not that you need to completely eliminate all mindless behavior and be perfectly mindful all the time. It's just not realistic. So it's just about bringing that awareness and starting to see certain patterns in your behaviors and your habits so that you can start to understand where you can make adjustments that make sense and that give you the most benefit, right? So what's going to give you the most benefit towards achieving your health goals, or what's going to give you the most benefit towards feeling less guilty about your food choices, or feeling more confident about your food choices. So whatever those goals are for you, that's where you want to start to be able to recognize these kinds of patterns. And it's progress over perfection here, right? So even if you just acknowledge one behavior that you're doing all the time, right? Maybe we want to work on just one thing at a time. Okay, so how do you become more mindful with your eating behaviors, right? So now you've brought awareness to these different eating habits, these different behaviors. Like I said, from anywhere from planning, what you're going to eat all the way through to actually eating it. How do you actually become more mindful now? So bringing awareness to your eating behaviors, right? That's the all-encompassing theme here. So how do we actually do this? So the first thing is to understand why you're eating in any moment. And that can feel a little bit silly, right? You're like, well, I eat because I have to eat, right? Like I'm hungry, or it's lunchtime, I have to eat. But there's actually a lot of different reasons why we might be eating in any moment. And it's not always because of hunger. So of course, one of them is, are you genuinely hungry? But you might also be eating because you're bored, or you're feeling stress or other emotions, right? Again, talking about the pandemic, there's been a lot more emotional eating. There's a lot of different food serves a lot of different purposes in our life. And so there's different reasons why we might be eating. Maybe it's a social situation, right? Maybe you're not even really that hungry, but you're going out, with friends, maybe it's happy hour or something, right? And so you just eat because everybody else is eating, right? It's just something to do in the social moment or something like a holiday, right? So there's a lot of different reasons why we might be eating. So the first thing, at any moment that you are going to eat, understand why you're eating in the first place. Because this awareness will help you understand what you really need to feel satisfied from your meal or snack. Okay, so if you're eating from a place of actual hunger, you want a snack or a meal that's going to truly satisfy that hunger. If it's emotion-based, you're going to want something that's going to satisfy that need for comfort. And it's really important to note that these are all very valid reasons for eating and nothing to feel badly about. You shouldn't feel badly for eating from a place of emotions. Stress eating is a real thing, and we'll actually, that will come up again later. But stress eating is a real thing. Boredom eating is a real thing. Feeling sad and wanting to eat to comfort yourself. These are valid things. But what bringing this awareness can do, right? If you bring awareness to these kinds of behaviors and you start to see a pattern that you are always reaching for sweets when you're down, right? If you recognize that you're always reaching for food to cope with emotions, then that's a really good way for you to identify that this is a behavior that's not really serving me well, right? It's not really supporting me the way that I want to be supported, because we don't want food to be our only way to cope with emotions, right? So it's a perfectly valid way to cope with emotion, but we don't want it to be our only way, right? That's where we can start to get into trouble a little bit. So what this now could tell you, by bringing awareness to these behaviors and recognizing that, wow, I'm like reaching for snacks a lot because I'm bored, or wow, I'm reaching for, sweets every time I feel stressed. There's got to be a better way, right? So now you can start to identify, one, why you're so stressed, why you're so bored, right? You can start to get to the root of that issue, because really in a situation like this, your reaching for sweets is not the issue, right? So I so often hear, especially women, feeling like they have no control over food, like you have no willpower, like you feel like you would just be way too out of control around sweets, so you can't even keep them in the house, right? And you can tell me in the chat if this resonates with you at all. So we tend to think that it's our fault, right? That we're the ones who have no self-control. But really, the root of the issue is your stress. It's your anxiety, right? It's whatever that emotion is that you're leaning on food for. So by bringing awareness to this, we recognize that pattern, right? We recognize that behavior, and you can address that underlying emotion, right? You can address that issue and find other ways to cope with those emotions, right? So maybe it's going for a walk, maybe it's taking a warm bath, calling a friend, maybe like for me, it's cooking, something that helps you, that helps you cope with emotion that's not food-based. Okay, so that was kind of a long-winded way of me saying that when you bring awareness to these kinds of behaviors, it helps you really understand what's at the root of your behaviors, right? And the root is what we want to get to in order to really solve whatever struggle or challenge might be going on. Okay, so the next thing is your eating environment, right? So bringing awareness to your eating environment. Where do you typically eat each of your meals? Are there distractions? Is there phone, TV, computers? Right. And again, like I mentioned, this has become a bigger challenge for a lot of people because of the pandemic, right? Your eating environment maybe now is the same, like you eat at the same place where you work, right? Like me, I don't have a home office here, so I sit at the dining room table on my computer. So it's kind of hard to differentiate, okay, I'm sitting here to eat now, let me put the computer away. It becomes a lot easier to to not take the real lunch break. So I do recommend having a designated spot for your meals, usually in the kitchen or dining area, right? So they say this about the bedroom too, right? Like the bedroom should be reserved for sleeping. You should keep your electronics out. Of course, it's easier said than done, but it's just getting your body in that place of, if you have a designated spot for sleeping, if you have a designated spot for eating, it gets your body in that mode, right? It gets your body set up, ready to say, okay, it's mealtime. That's kind of like the first step in bringing mindfulness to your mealtime, right? That's the first step in being more present during that meal. Okay, and then how are you preparing your meals and snacks? Is it chaotic? Do you have a meal planning and prep strategy? And even if you do, does it support you well? Right? So again, bringing awareness to not just the actual act of eating, but leading up to it. Do you have a meal planning and prep strategy that's supporting you well? Or when it comes to cooking, are you kind of all over the place, right? When it comes to putting a meal together, are you all over the place? So we want to bring awareness to that too and figure out, well, if this isn't really supporting you well, right? Because every time you step in the kitchen, it shouldn't be a stressful, chaotic mess, right? Nobody wants that. That's not sustainable. So we need strategies that are sustainable, that do support us long term. So if you can bring awareness to that and understand what about this is not serving me well, then what can I do to make it better support me? Okay, and next is your actual eating behaviors during a meal. So these are just some questions to reflect on. So this is kind of the meat of meat, pun intended, I guess. This is kind of the meat of the mindful eating piece, right? Now you're actually eating. So again, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to these kinds of situations. Most of us do rush through our meals, right? Especially we're such a go, go, go kind of society. And of course it's a little bit different in the pandemic world, but we're used to, taking breakfast on the go. We're used to having like a super quick lunch break, like got to get back to work, right? Everything's on the go. A lot of times you're just eating because you have to eat, but you're not really paying attention to what you're eating. It's just kind of like, you got to get the meal out of the way. So bringing awareness to your actual eating behaviors during a meal is going to be really critical for a lot of reasons. And we'll dive into that. But so these are some questions to start reflecting on a little bit. Do you rush through your meals? Do you tend to take another bite before you've even swallowed the last one? Do you find yourself saying, I need to slow down while you're eating, right? Do you feel yourself getting full very quickly? These are all signs, if you answer yes to all of these, right? These are signs that we just need to slow down a little bit, right? And be more present. Like I said, that was one of the pillars of mindfulness at the beginning, right? We need to be more present with our mealtime and be more present with our food. And that in turn helps us be more aware of our hunger and our fullness. Okay, so you have, and we will get into this a bit more too, you have hunger and fullness cues. Okay, your body, of course, you know what a feeling of hunger and what a feeling of fullness feels like. And so your hunger and fullness, these are internal cues. Okay, so do you pay close attention to your hunger before a meal, or do you eat out of habit or because you should, right? So that was what I just mentioned before, that for so many of us, with the workday and just whatever, busyness, we just all have busy lifestyles, right? A lot of times we're not really paying that close attention to actually how hungry we are and we're just eating because we should, right? Because it's lunchtime, I have to eat. Are your portions or the amount that you eat dictated by the rules of a diet that you follow? Right? So if getting in tune with your hunger and fullness helps you to understand how much you actually need to eat to feel satisfied. Okay, and for a lot of us, we've been on diets before. We go on and off diets, and there's different rules of these diets, and that sometimes is dictating how much you eat. But it could be more or less than what you actually need based on your internal cues. Okay, so we're going to get into that now. So the last thing, of course, is to bring awareness to the types of food that you eat. Okay, so understanding actually what kinds of foods, what variety of foods, right? So tracking your food intake short term can actually be a very useful tool. I like to move people off of tracking their food because I don't believe it's a very sustainable tool to use long term, because it makes it more difficult for you to eat on a whim, right? It makes it more difficult for you to eat spontaneously. It makes it more challenging when you're taken out of your usual home, right? When you're taken kind of out of your comfort zone for travel, just eating at somebody else's house. It just makes all of these things more difficult when you have to pay that close attention to every single thing that you're eating. But tracking your food intake for the short term can be a really useful tool to get a good picture of the types of foods that you are eating, right? So doing it just for a few weeks, for 3 or 4 weeks, to get a really good picture of what types of foods you're eating, when you're eating them, how you're eating them, how you feel before and after you're eating them. This can be really great as a short-term tool. All right, so we can start to see, are you getting in a good balance of food groups at each meal? Are you getting enough fiber and other nutrients every day, every week? Is there a variety of different foods, or do you tend to eat the same foods over and over again? Right, and variety, of course, is important for getting different kinds of nutrients in, right? So it doesn't have to mean that you're having a huge variety every single day, but week to week or even month to month, we want to see that you're getting some different kinds of foods and different kinds of vegetables, different kinds of fruits, right? Different kinds of whole grains to get different kinds of nutrients in, as well as to prevent you from getting bored from eating the same things. And so, like I said, it helps us take note of patterns and where you can start making some changes. And so implementing mindful strategies can help you move on from tracking, right? So that's what we're going to dive into now. But you can see from some of the things that I've already mentioned, bringing that awareness to your eating behaviors and bringing more awareness to your internal cues can really help you move on from tracking your food. Okay, oh, there we go. Okay. So you received this handout in the email that Okaria sent. If you didn't get it before you hopped on this Zoom, you'll have an email afterwards with the resources that I'm going to cover in this presentation. So these are mindful eating reflections. So the first sheet here is reflections before a meal or snack, and the second sheet is for after a meal or snack. So this just kind of ties in a lot of the things that I was just mentioning in a worksheet, right? So it can feel kind of silly or uncomfortable to ask yourself these questions, right? It's like diving deeper into why we eat and how we eat on a level that we're not really used to, right? We're used to just kind of eating because we have to eat. It becomes habit. But that's where it becomes challenging, because we're not really even aware of what these habits even are anymore, because they become such habit, right? So that's why we need to work on bringing awareness to it, right? We need to actively bring awareness to our eating behaviors. So it can be really helpful. You don't have to write down your answers every time you go to eat, but writing it down can be a helpful way to to make sure that you're kind of asking yourself these questions. But these are just some questions, even if you just think them in your head before you eat and after you eat. So the first question before a meal or snack is assessing how hungry am I, right? And you're going to use the hunger and fullness scale, which is another resource that you got, and that will come up here in just a minute. What do I need from this meal or snack right now, right? So that was one of the questions that I asked on an earlier slide, is understanding why you need to eat in any moment, right? Is it to satisfy hunger, comfort? Is it that you just know you need to eat, right? Sometimes the workday gets so busy that we don't stop, lunch just kind of goes by and you're like, wow, I need to stop. I know I need to eat. I haven't eaten for hours, right? And then what do I need to feel satisfied from this meal or snack? So that's taking into consideration not just your hunger level, but also what you're actually in the mood to eat. Okay, and that satisfaction piece, that's why I say, what do I need to feel satisfied from this meal? Not just what do I need to feel full, because there's a difference between just being physically full, right? Just literally filling up your belly versus actually feeling satisfied from the meal. Okay, and that feeling of satisfaction, that's what's going to keep you actually feeling content. And that's what's going to prevent you from feeling hungry 30 minutes later, right? Or even an hour later and scavenging for snacks, right? It can be really easy to fill up your stomach, but if you didn't satisfy what your body was craving, right? Which is why it's important to become more in tune with what your body needs. If you ate, let's say you ate a salad, and I always use salad as an example, I'm not knocking salads, but let's say you eat a salad and what you were really in the mood for was something warm, like maybe a warm panini, right? Like maybe a warm sandwich or something, but instead you ate a salad. You are not going to feel satisfied from that salad because your body wanted something warm, it wanted something kind of chewy, and you gave it something cold and crunchy. Okay, so you can see the difference there. And so that feeling of satisfaction, that's what we're looking for. And then after a meal or snack, we want to reflect on, of course, how full am I, right? How satisfied am I? Am I too full? Am I full but not quite satisfied? And why might I feel too full, not quite full enough, or happily satisfied, right? What worked about this meal or snack? What didn't? Did I prepare and eat this meal or snack mindfully, or was I distracted? What might I do differently? Do I want to eat this meal or snack again, right? Is this something that I want to, keep in the rotation and switch up a little bit? Is this something that worked really well for me? Okay, so again, this is bringing that non-judgmental awareness to your meals before and after you eat. Okay, so this brings me into the problem with diets. And I've kind of been talking about it a little bit as we're moving through. But so most adults, and especially women, have tried at least one diet, right? Usually to help them lose weight. Most who have dieted have tried more than one diet and end up in a dieting cycle, right? We end up in this yo-yo dieting cycle, on and off and on and off. And most diets on the market come with their own set of rules and food restrictions, right? Like the rules for keto are different than the rules for a Whole30 and a paleo diet and Weight Watchers and the South Beach diet and Jenny Craig, and like, it's insane how many diets exist today. And if you've tried more than one kind of diet, or even like I know something like Weight Watchers has changed a ton over the years, right? So even if you're kind of sticking with the same diet that's worked for you before, the rules might have changed, right? And so it gets totally confusing, right? This is the number one reason that I see people seeking out a dietitian, is because they've been on and off these diets. They've, had this set of rules, had this set of restrictions, were told these foods were good, these foods were bad, you should eat this now, and you should eat this thing at this time, and you shouldn't eat at this time. Like, it's insane. And it creates a ton of confusion about what you actually should be eating, right? And you're often eating with an outcomes mentality. So you're kind of eating with like, it's a means to an end, right? And often that end is weight loss. So you're not really paying attention to how the food actually feels in your body, right? Not really paying attention to your hunger and your fullness. You're really focused on these external cues, right? So diet rules are external cues. They're telling you what you should or should not eat, when you should or when you should not eat. They're telling you certain foods are good, certain foods are bad. You should have this, X amount of this food and all of this. These are external cues. But that's pulling you away from your internal cues. Okay, that's pulling you away from the things that your body knows best. And I think that this is written on one of the slides, but I'm going to say it now. Anyway, your body knows what you need better than any diet ever will. And your body does have the ability to tell you how much is enough, to tell you what you need, what you're lacking, or what you're having too much of, right? That can show up as physical symptoms. Okay. So we really want, when it comes to mindfulness, we really want to be able to tune into our bodies more and tune into these internal cues that we have. Okay. So what are your internal cues, right? So your hormones, they trigger cues that present as physical and emotional feelings. So you have hormones that trigger hunger, that trigger fullness, that trigger a stress response, which might lead to what we call stress eating, right? But these internal cues, these are what will really empower you to know how much and what types of foods are best for you, right? So that you can really make individualized decisions and feel confident about those decisions. Here's the sentence. So your body really does know better than any diet what types of foods and how much food you need to eat. Okay, so you can become more mindful of what your body is telling you when you get out of your head a bit and actually into your body and feel the signs, feel the symptoms that your body is expressing to you. And that feeling of satisfaction, right? So when you slow down and truly enjoy what you're eating, this leads to greater feelings of satisfaction. And this is what ultimately leads you to feeling content and preventing overeating. So often, so many of the challenges that we might think that we have around food, like I said, it shows up as you feeling like you have no self-control around certain foods, or you're addicted to certain foods, or you have no willpower, or you binge on snacks a lot, where you feel like you are just like a grazer and you can't stop snacking. All of these kinds of feelings truly typically come from too much restriction in your diet. And this often comes from being on and off different kinds of diets and just simply not feeling confident in what to eat anymore, right? And so we end up over-restricting carbs. We end up over-restricting fat. We end up over-restricting our sweets. Sometimes we end up restricting fruit, right? Because we're told that there's too much sugar, which is silly. And so things like overeating, that might come from you only eating to satisfy your fullness, but not to actually satisfy what your body needs in that moment. Okay, and that's that difference between fullness and satisfaction. Okay, so here is that hunger and fullness scale. And so you have this as well. So we want to use the hunger and fullness scale before and after meals, right? So that was part of those, the mindful eating reflections. So this is to help you become more mindful of your hunger so that you can eat the appropriate portions without having to measure and weigh and track everything, right? If you can slow down when you're eating and truly feel how, if you recognize that level of hunger at the start of a meal and you're eating slowly, then you can start to identify how that feeling of hunger is changing, how it's going away, until you get to the point that you are happily satisfied and comfortably full. Right? So we want to avoid that feeling of a 1 or a 2 before eating, and we want to avoid the feeling of a 9 or a 10 after eating. So your hunger changes day to day based on factors like activity level, your stress, your hormones, especially for women, our hormones change throughout a 24-hour period. Okay, so all of these factors can play a role in how much you actually need to eat each day and at each meal. So you might even have the same meal from one day to the next, but one day you might finish the whole thing, and the next day you might not need to finish the whole meal. You might not need to finish that whole portion, right? So you can see that if you're relying on external cues like a diet plan to tell you how much to eat, you might finish that meal and actually end up being overfull, right? You might end up in that like 9 or 10 place where you're feeling more stuffed. Whereas if you can listen to your body and your body is like, hey, I'm full already, like you don't have to finish the plate, right? You don't have to always finish your portions, or you might need more than the diet plan told you, right? You might be at like a 5 or a 6 at the end of your meal. Like you haven't even reached a 7, but you don't want to add more to it because it's not allowed on your diet, right? It's more than your diet is telling you. It's more calories than you were allowed at that meal. But your body knows better. And if your body doesn't feel satisfied, then you should allow yourself that permission to eat a little bit more. And of course, you can use the scale with snacks too, right? So you know how big of a snack you need and understand your purpose for a snack. The same way that we want to understand why we're eating a meal in any moment, you also want to understand that with a snack, right? Do I need this snack to carry me over for, I know I'm going to be late with work tonight. I'm not going to have dinner until really late. I need the snack to like really tide me over for a couple of hours. Or is it a snack that's kind of like you're eating more out of emotion or boredom kind of thing? Okay, and so I kind of covered this already about portion and serving sizes, right? So you may be uncertain about how much you should eat if you're not directed via a diet plan or a food tracker. And that's totally normal, especially if you've been on and off different diets for years, right? You become used to having something else tell you how much to eat. And it can feel a little scary almost to leave that up to you, right? It can take time to really learn to trust that your body does know. So what I recommend is that you use the serving size on a package as a starting point. Okay, so a serving size on a package, there's really not one serving size or one portion size of every single food in the world that is the appropriate serving or portion size for every single human in the world, right? That's just silly. We're all different, right? So the serving size is based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet for an average adult. So that's not set in stone. That doesn't mean that you can have more or less than the serving size on the package, but it's a good place to start. And then you can use these mindfulness strategies we've been talking about to identify how that portion felt for you, right? Was it enough or too little? And this is all, the same kinds of questions that are in those the mindful reflections, and using the hunger and fullness scale too, to really assess how that portion felt for you. And then giving yourself that permission to eat more if you're not quite satisfied, or to not entirely clean your plate if you do feel satisfied before you've eaten it all. So you probably gathered what some of the benefits of mindful eating are just through talking about it. So we'll just run through these quickly, right? Of course, it helps you stick to your health goals because you're making less reactive and impulsive decisions, right? You're eating the right amounts for you. So you're helping to overcome overeating or undereating, which typically leads to overeating, right? Undereating typically leads to overeating. You get a better understanding of your habits to be able to make adjustments that better support your lifestyle, right? Meaning you can really stick with them for the long haul. They're habits that you can really stick to. And that's what we're looking for here, right? This is why so many quick fixes and 30-day plans and things like this, they don't support us long-term, right? We need to make habits that fit within our lifestyle, not the other way around, right? You shouldn't be having to do a whole overhaul of your current lifestyle to make your eating habits work. Your habits should fit within the lifestyle that you live. They should support you. Mindful eating helps to enjoy food more and therefore improve your relationship with food. Again, that being present, right? Being more present with your loved ones around the table, more connection around the table, putting the cell phones away, not watching TV while you're eating, really having real conversation around the table. And a physical benefit is that it will improve your digestion as well, right? So your digestion starts with chewing, right? So the food goes in the mouth, you start chewing, and that's what starts signaling the whole process of digestion to start. That's what's sending, signals between your gut and your brain to start the whole process. And so from the moment that you're eating, if you're chewing more slowly, you're just generally eating more slowly, taking bites more slowly, chewing thoroughly, swallowing before you take another bite. You're sitting well postured at in a chair, at a table, instead of being maybe slouched on the couch, right? All of these things will help to improve digestion. Okay. And then, of course, we're becoming more in tune with our body's internal cues, right? So you can rely less on dieting and more on yourself. You can learn to trust yourself and better understand how your body reacts and responds to certain types of foods. So this can also really help you identify food triggers, right? If you're having some physical symptoms, if you tend to have a lot of bloating, gas, if you have skin breakouts all the time, if you have trouble sleeping, if you have trouble focusing during the day, a lot of these things are related to the food that you eat. And so if you can start to identify different patterns, like we've been saying, you can better understand how your body actually reacts and responds to certain types of foods, which can, of course, improve your overall health outcomes. And like I mentioned, it's a long-term sustainable approach, right? And that's what we're looking for. Your health is not a short-term thing, right? We have short-term goals. That's totally normal to have certain short-term goals that we're constantly working on, reassessing, setting new goals, right? Like it says here, your body, your health, and your lifestyle all change over time, right? And so what you're looking for, what your values are for your health, and when I say health, again, I mean all facets of your health, not just your physical health. We need strategies and we need habits that can actually move with us through our lifetime, right? So mindfulness strategies allow you to reconnect with what feels good at varying stages of life, right? So what felt good for you in your 20s may not feel good for you when you're menopausal, right? It's very different. Of course, think of something like a pregnancy, right? What you need to do to, best maintain your health during your pregnancy is going to be different postpartum, right? So even something as short as a 9-month period can change our goals and change our habits, change how we're approaching the way that we eat. And so having that ability to be in tune with your body is going to allow you to reconnect with what feels good as things change, as life changes. Okay. And lastly, to note, what about mindful cooking, right? So that's part of this as well. And we've kind of been talking about the cooking part, right? When I say cooking, I also just mean prepping, right? Like your meal prep and the whole process of planning your meals and going grocery shopping and prepping your food, right? So often when we're in the kitchen, there's chaos, there's speed, right? And so I mentioned this before, you want to have a cooking strategy that really supports your lifestyle, not one that makes it more chaotic or more hectic or more stressful, right? So mindfulness in the kitchen, just like eating more mindfully allows you to more deeply connect with food and improve your relationship with food, so does being more mindful in the kitchen when you're actually preparing the food. Being more mindful in the kitchen can also help improve your cooking skills, because you can start to really notice how certain ingredients change flavors, right? You can, experiment with different spices or different herbs, different cooking methods, right? And you learn how all these things change flavors, change textures. You learn what you like and what you don't like. You know that if you're craving something crispy, you know that you're not going to want to steam it, you're going to want to roast it, right? So little things like this can really help improve your cooking skills. And you also want to slow down when you're following recipes, right? It can be so easy to just like rush through a recipe to get the meal on the table. But when you're more mindful in the moment and you slow down as you're following a recipe, you can really understand why is this the step? Like, why am I doing it in this order? What did this do to the food? How did this change the food? And you can really start to pick up on some cooking skills just by being more mindful when you're following a recipe. And you can learn to really enjoy the process of cooking, right? So I said this before, that it's when you're in the kitchen, if it's very chaotic and stressful and messy every time you step in the kitchen, of course you're not going to like cooking, right? That's not fun for anybody. Nobody wants that every single day, and especially not at the end of your workday. You don't want to step into the kitchen and it's something that you dread, right? So you really want to start learning what you like and what you don't like in the kitchen, right? And really connecting with that process of cooking by being more mindful is going to really help you with that and help you to make it a more sustainable habit to really support your healthy eating goals. Okay, just check the time here. Okay, so this is a mindfulness exercise. Okay, and so if you got these handouts beforehand, we are using trail mix for this exercise, right? And so I chose trail mix for this because trail mix is one of those snacks that can be really healthy, but it can also turn into not so healthy really quickly, right? Because it's really easy to overeat, and it's easy to kind of fill it with some ingredients that aren't as nutritious as we want, right? So I want you to really do this exercise. We won't take all the time to do it right now, but I want you to really do this exercise. And you don't even have to do it with trail mix. You can do it with one of your favorite snacks, something that you typically overeat, or something that you think that you are kind of out of control around, right? That's a good, something like a piece of chocolate or, some sort of sweet. That's a good thing to do this exercise with. Again, it's going to feel a little weird. It's going to feel a little uncomfortable to eat this way. And you certainly don't have to be this mindful every single time you eat. It's a little bit exaggerated, but that's kind of the point, right? So we want to really bring all of our senses into this, right? So when you're mindfully eating, you're really bringing all your senses, all 5 senses into the process, right? So it starts with the internal reflection. Then when you're preparing the snack, right? Instead of just eating the trail mix from the bag, you're serving out a portion. And I have mine here, right? You're serving out a portion into a small dish or cup, right? And then observe the qualities of the trail mix, right? Notice what ingredients. I have almonds, I have pecans, I have dried cranberries, and I have chocolate chips in here. Notice the different ingredients, right? Eat one at a time. Really taste each of them. Observe the texture of them. Observe how they feel in your mouth, right? Then eat them, 2 different pieces at a time. Eat them all 4 pieces at a time. How does that feel different? How does it taste different? Right? Eat it slowly. Eat one bite at a time. Nuts take a lot of chewing, right? Really chew on those almonds and the pecans and whatever nuts or seeds you put in your trail mix. Really chew on them slowly. Chewing thoroughly, fully swallowing before you take another bite. Tune into your body as you're eating the trail mix, right? Are you starting to feel more satisfied? Are you starting to feel full, right? Really start to pay attention to what that hunger, and preferably do this exercise at a time that you are a little bit hungry too, right? Because we want to pay attention to that hunger before eating the snack and how that's changing for us as we're eating. Okay, and then there are questions to ask yourself at the end of the mindful eating exercise, things to reflect on, right? Did you notice that some of the ingredients were more satisfying? Did you eat less trail mix than you normally do and feel satisfied, right? Okay, so just like I said, you don't have to be as intricately mindful as you practice in that exercise with every single meal and snack, right? It's just unrealistic. And like I said, it's going to feel a little weird. It's going to feel a little uncomfortable the first time that you start to be that mindful when you're eating. But just by doing an exercise like that, it will just start to be natural that you'll start to have those thoughts without having to, kind of like initiate it yourself. You'll just start to have these thoughts naturally when you're eating. You'll start to think, how hungry am I? What am I in the mood for? Right, so you want to just try to practice at least 1 or 2 mindfulness strategies with each meal or snack. So maybe it's bringing more awareness to your hunger and fullness. Maybe it's sitting in a quiet space, not just say quiet, without distraction, right? Maybe it's changing up your eating environment. Whatever it is, whatever works for you, just try to change. I shouldn't even say change, but try to practice, like it says, try to practice at least 1 or 2 mindfulness strategies with each meal or snack. There's no right or wrong way to practice mindful eating. Okay, so it's whatever works for you. And remember that your eating habits are meant to support you for the long haul, right? Using tools like the hunger and fullness scale and meal reflections will help you to really begin to connect with how your body feels before and after meals. Okay, and of course, we want to limit distractions when we're meal planning, grocery shopping, cooking, and eating. Okay, so those are the key takeaways here. Oh, and slow it down. The number one thing probably is with everything, right? To just slow down a little bit. That's the best way to start becoming more mindful, is to just slow down. Okay, and so that's it. So if you have, I'm going to, I'll put up this slide here. So thank you for attending this mindful eating and cooking workshop. These are some ways that you can connect with me outside of this workshop. So that's my website there, chefgirlnutrition.com. On Facebook, I have a free Facebook group, and I go live every week doing cooking demos or nutrition lessons. I also have an email list. I send out weekly emails. And if you want to be added to that, you can email me directly at my email there, Jennifer@chefgirlnutrition.com. And I will
And Jen, I'm actually going to end the recording here.
stop.
And